Hello, hello. We are now live. I'm just gonna give the stream 1 second to for people to join, and then we will start the stream. So just gonna let people know that we are indeed going live, and then it's gonna be good time. So today we're sculpting a Dobby character. This guy has been on the stream before, so we're going to be working more on him. Just giving people a second to join. Alright, so if somebody can confirm that the audio is indeed working as it should, then should be good. It's pretty cool when ZBrush just decides to kill your undo history. So now I don't have an undo history on this guy anymore. It's very, very, very annoying. Sometimes, man, this just happens. Hard to say why. It just does. If it's because it runs out of RAM or something. But, you know, this stuff happens. So I'm just going to load in one of my custom brushes here. Because I accidentally screwed this up a little bit now. And the way I'm going to be doing it today is I'm going to be taking this guy. And I'm going to just go a little nuts. So I've been sculpting for a long time on a lot of things recently, a lot of realistic stuff. And honestly, I'm getting a little bit bored from that. So what I'll do is I'll do something akin to what I'm doing on this dude here, which is old school heading sculpting, which is just me doodling around having fun. This is Sticks from the video games, Sticks. And I'll do something like that with Mr. Dobby here as well. So this is going to be me just kind of just doodling around and seeing what I come up with. So when it comes to this, what a lot of people do when they're doing these kind of like experimental brushstrokey things like I'm doing now is that they're doing what I'm doing now. They're not sculpting this from scratch with beautiful brushstrokes and it's super controlled. They do clean shapes and then they do this. They're just not honest about it. And I'm at least honest about this, that this is a clean sculpt from scratch, and all the artistic stuff I'll do is something that we will just be adding on top for fun afterwards. Sometimes I do sculpt it from scratch as well, but like with these kind of brushes in mind, but often I'm just doodling around and seeing what happens. I'm trying to be a bit deliberate with the strokes, just really trying to make them nice and clean. I'm not just doing this kind of stuff, random crap. I'm trying to make good clean shapes, and I'm trying to essentially make this nice and planar. And I think that's important if you're doing something more, get more a bit edgy, is that, well, you need to make it edgy. You can't just make it have brushstrokes, because brushstrokes by themselves aren't really cool. What's cool is when you have a character that feels expressive, not just like brushstrokes by themselves are not going to do anything. So we're just going over here. Well, I'm going over here and we're just doing this. I'm so used to doing tutorials where it's we doing it, but in this case, it's me doing it. And yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions. This is good cozy sculpting for me, so I should be able to do a lot of questions as well. It's a lot harder to sculpt this kind of stuff if it's about core character design. That's legitimately really, really difficult to do at the same time, or to talk at the same time as doing core character design. Because for me, core character design is about, it's very intellectual in a sense, where you have to really think about all the proportions and just really thinking a lot. Well, what I'm doing now, it's, of course, I still have to think about stuff, but not to the same extent. It's more an intuitive thing compared to something we have to properly design everything. So I'm going to be breaking symmetry quite a lot. The model is still fundamentally symmetrical. Sure, I'm working without symmetry, but the model is still very symmetrical. So I'm going to start to break that up as well at some point with probably the move brush. I just have fun with that. I started Dobby about maybe, I don't know, a year and a half ago or something. I went to the Warner Brothers tour in London where they actually filmed Harry Potter. So they have a studio tour, and they have a lot of the maquettes and things like that they used for the film. And they have a live model of Dobby, you know, as tall as he is, which is about 1 meter or something. So I just went crazy and took all the photos. I took like 50 photos of him from all angles, took videos and everything. Got back home and I just sculpted this dude. So it's good fun. It's one of those movies I really wished I worked on, but that was before my time in VFX. which was a bit annoying because all the people I worked with in the big studios there, like an NPC and such, NPC dealing and Framestore were basically built around Harry Potter, so tons of people there had a chance to work on those films, but alas, I was too young. Also, those movies are quite old at this point. So you pretty much got to be in your 40s today to have actually worked on the Harry Potter movies, I think. The early ones, I mean, are like, I was 8 or 9 when the first one came out. So yeah, no way you could do that. But I always really liked Dobby. It's a really, really nice looking character. I'm just playing around with them. I'm not sure where I'm taking him, and I might go... I might not even make Dobby. I might turn him into some like Cretcher style character, which is a bit more of a cynical looking one, or I might just make him into a really sweet looking house elf. Not entirely sure. So I'm really focusing just on making nice and organic strokes, and I'm not just doing this willy-nilly. I am specifically trying to follow the flow and trying to work up the shapes and make some interesting plane changes and such. Just generally just making them into something a bit more interesting. I really like what's happening here with sticks, where this is just a quick doodle right at like late at night, but I really like what's happening with his nose, for instance. I think there are a lot of interesting planes here, so I'll try to do something like that with this dude as well. It's really fun to sculpt without symmetry as well. You end up with really interesting characters. Obviously it takes a lot longer, but it is what it is. It doesn't take fully twice as long, I think, because a lot of the... you can still work with symmetry in the beginning to block things out, but also you know a lot of the decisions, and a lot of sculpting is about coming down with decisions, figuring what you want to do. But it still takes, obviously, much longer to sculpt without symmetry. This is a really fun brush. This is the clay tubes, but with a custom alpha, and I really like the feel I'm getting from it. We were talking yesterday about maybe releasing this as a brush pack on Fleet Moments as well, and there's been a lot of requests for a similar style brush like this. So yeah, you might see that in the near-ish future. So it's a fun brush to play around with. One little tip is to go to stroke modifiers and then set the roll distance to something like 7. That just gives you a much, much smoother brush, particularly if dealing with something like the clay tubes, because the clay tubes, it's a pretty harsh brush. I don't really like the original clay tubes just because it's just really ruthless. I don't really feel like I control it that well. It just is very, very, very harsh. And this one here is, with this alpha, is a bit smoother, but also the feeling is just a bit nicer. Yeah, the brush pack hasn't hit a store yet, but it will. Do you have any tips on how to sculpt thin volumes and how to make holes through the model? I'm not really sure entirely what you mean. Sculpting holes through a thin model. Yeah, if you could elaborate on that, that'd be nice. Yeah, it's very relaxing doing this. I have some music on my ears as well, just for sculpting with this. Just some nice lo-fi music. I really like doing that when I'm doing mentorship reviews, or if I'm just sculpting with this, just having some nice, or doing like live streams, just having some nice tunes to just break up the silence can be quite lovely. And sculpting with asymmetry is it just produces interesting results. I would not do this for a production model unless the model very specifically needs to be asymmetrical. For production models, I try to make that as symmetrical as you can, because then you just save so much time. So unless the design very specifically requires it to be asymmetrical, I wouldn't really do stuff with asymmetry. And if it requires asymmetry, I would try to be smart about it. So for instance, if there is a third eye or something, try to make the symmetrical in the center, or if he has 3 arms, an extra arm, maybe try to make one arm detached something like that. How do you deal with art block? Man, that's a tricky one. That's a really, really hard one. It really depends on what kind of art block it is, because it can be different things. So it can be that you're creatively fatigued, so you can still kind of create sculpts or follow tutorials and, you know, do schoolwork assignment, but you don't really feel inspired. Or it can be that you're just burnt out and you don't feel like doing anything in 3D or any art at all. It really depends on what it is. Sometimes you also just gotta, like, it's a tricky one because sometimes you gotta rest. You've done too much stuff recently with art, and you just genuinely need to just take a break for a week and just go for, like, unplug, go for nice walks in the forest, and just really don't consume social media or art or anything like that. Just let your brain rest like that. And sometimes you've been doing art that you're not enjoying. This is what I'm doing now with this, because up until what I was doing with this guy until this point, I thought it was okay, but I wasn't really feeling it. And what I'm doing now is I'm kind of recharging my levels, but doing something I'm actually enjoying. And what I'm enjoying is doing this kind of random brushy stuff like this. I think this is a lot of fun. So you can either essentially recharge by not doing anything, or you can do stuff that you really enjoy. Sometimes if you're doing personal projects or if you're doing portfolio pieces, that can be tricky, because sometimes, man, you're not enjoying the portfolio piece. It feels like actually doing work, just that you're not getting paid for it. And then I think it's really useful to either rethink what the portfolio piece is, or, like, so to the point that you need to do something you genuinely enjoy as a portfolio piece, or you need to, if you just need to get something done, let's say as group work for university or something, to spend a bit of time every day on your own projects. I think it's really important to do that, so you're not just working on only crappy stuff or stuff you aren't enjoying, even if it's great stuff. Sometimes you just aren't feeling it. So this can be, for instance, you're doing a speed sculpt a day. I really enjoy doing those, where you just find a theme. And I used to actually run a speed sculpting group on Facebook way back in the day when you had tons of members. So we used to do like daily speed sculpting. That was tons of fun. So just doing that can be really great. But art block is a complex thing with not a single cause or a single solution, because there's so much that it's so many individual factors here. It's also like the advice I'm giving now is completely opposite, right? Like, it's completely contradictory. Oh, you either take a break or you do more work, right? All right, cool. So which one is it? Do you relax or do you not relax? It really, really, really depends on you as a person as well. But sometimes you also, like, one of those is you think you need a break, but really you don't need a break. What you need to do is you need to just force yourself to get started as well. Like, I have this sometimes where I really need to do some actual work. Well, this could be with filmomals or just like sculpting or anything like that. And I just have to pull through. And it's really hard to get started. But once I get started, I'm really feeling it. Then I get into the flow. Then what I do, I set up a timer. I often use our Pomodoro timers. So that the way that works is you have 25 minutes or so of work, and then you have a bit of a break. And I usually need 1 or 2 of those, and then I'm in the flow. Then I just close the tab because I'm using a timer online for that, and just close that down, and then I'm back in business. So that can also work really well, where you just need to kickstart it. I have this with going to the gym sometimes, where I really don't feel like going to the gym, and what I do is I just break it down into smaller chunks. All right, I don't need to go to the gym. I just need to put on my shoes, and then need to take the elevator, and then I need to, just go over to the building. That's not hard. And then I'm not gonna lift a lot. I'm just gonna be on the bike for a few minutes, right? And just like break it down to smaller things, where instead of saying, well, I'm gonna sculpt for like 8 hours, now the only thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open ZBrush. And it's not very hard. Then I'm just gonna sculpt for 10 minutes, and then 10 minutes pass, and you're like, okay, I can do 10 more minutes, and then that's also a way to kickstart it. It's basically a way to fool the brain. I think that's something that can really, really, really help you. Just forcing yourself to get kickstarted into different things. Sometimes as well, if I don't feel inspired by doing something, I watch videos. So in this case, we obviously make tons of videos on YouTube for tutorials like that. But I have this, if if it's something I don't feel like I'm trying something out and it doesn't really work. So let's say I'm trying to sculpt an animal or something and I just can't figure it out. After a little while, I'll just look up tutorials. I'll just see how other people are solving it or new reference or something, trying to keep it fresh, and that can help a crazy amount. Is there such a thing as having objectively bad taste in art, or is it purely subjective? I think art is entirely subjective. I don't think there was anything such a thing as a subjective thing. I think if people enjoy it, then people enjoy it. Taste is a tricky one. Some people say they have good or bad taste, but man, this stuff changes with time as well. You can have something that people think is awesome now, and then in 5 years, people consider it bad taste. It's really tricky. Look at a lot of fashion from the 70s and such. I don't think it's particularly pretty, but I think people loved that stuff back then. So I think art is almost entirely subjective, but that's also my opinion as well. Maybe there are some people who would think differently about that. I think there are stuff such as unprofessional art though. Like if it's bad taste or not is a different thing, but I think there are definitely things I would not put in a portfolio though. Like regardless of how technically well executed it might be, there are definitely a lot of things. Like if you're applying for ILM or something, don't put like furry stuff in your portfolio, right? Like it's there. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. But if you art galleries, I mean, who knows, right? Who knows what's going on there? I have actually a really good here from, it's a good question. How do you recommend advancing anatomy knowledge from moderate to advanced? A crochet or similar, or just grinding skinned models? I think there are a few different levels. When people are talking about their own level, like intermediate to advanced, it's really hard to know what that means. So I'm not going to really focus too much on intermediate or advanced, just like different levels of different tiers of studying anatomy. You have a tier which is one of the first ones where you don't really know anything about anatomy. You generally don't know the muscles. So this is where you need to just study the muscles and the bones. So where you just straight up go through and you just need to just rote memory, just go through it, grind this kind of stuff. A good way to do this, one of the best exercises, is to try to sculpt a model with all the muscles from memory. Basically, no ref. And then you do another one, which is ref. So first you do it without any reference whatsoever, and then you try to do it with reference. And this is stupidly hardcore. This is when here is gonna suck. This is really, really, really difficult. Bad times. But you're gonna learn a crazy amount from this. And then you have a reference, and the difference is you get a delta between these two. You get to figure out here. You get to figure out that you don't really know too much about anatomy. You get to figure out you don't really know the names of them, and then you're gonna put them in and you're gonna remake it based on that. And you keep doing this a few different times. So just no ref and then ref. This is great. And then you have a second tier, which is you're no longer doing theoretical anatomy, because this is all theoretical. Like when you're doing anatomy here, this is all based on like a crochet models. A crochet is, if you want to have this a crochet is just a model without skin. So you have the bone without skin or fat traditionally. So this is a model which has only bones and only muscles. And this is a great way to learn it, but it's only theoretical. You need to do practical stuff. So this is where you need to do studies. This is really, really, really studies. You need to just do studies. This is really important because this is where it becomes practical. So you need the theory because you need just to understand what's going on, and then you need to do real world studies. Find a scan or find references of real world people and try to recreate them as much as possible. And if you keep doing these two things, both studying the anatomy so you understand what's going on, that's great, but also you just need to do real world studies. I keep talking to, when I talk to my mentees and general students, I keep comparing studying CG to languages. And there's a comparison here, which is if you want to learn a language, you just need to know the language in theory, which means you need to understand the grammar structure and understand a lot of words and spellings and pronunciations, all that kind of stuff. But that's not really going to help you too much when it comes to ordering something from a restaurant or something, because people there don't speak slowly. People there aren't patient. People have accents, right? And there are lots of dialects and weird words that you haven't heard before. And if you don't know what's up, you're not going to be able to order correctly. So you need to have both parts. You need to have the theory of how a language is like actually works, and then you need a lot of practice with this. Could be listening to real world conversations, but of course you also have to speak it as well. But you just need real world conversations to listen to. Some of that can be like listening to TV, right? Just having real conversation, but also just hearing it in real world as well. It's the same thing with sculpting. You need to do real world studies. You can often tell if somebody's doing only theoretical studies, meaning they only study the anatomy from an crochet model. And then you have that would be like having somebody who knows all the words in French, like maybe like they know like 20,000 words in French, but they can't speak the language because, or if they do, they sound incredibly robotic or maybe with a very thick accent or something like that. Versus somebody who has a more intuitive understanding of sculpting, which is much more observation based. So I think it's really, really, really important to do real world studies. You can, of course, do live clay sessions as well, where you have a live model and you're working with clay. But a nice way to do this in 3D is to use either reference packs, or it can be to use actual scans of people. This can be very, very, very beneficial. With the current version of Blender, can one achieve such sculpting details? Yeah, I suppose you can. It's sculpting in Blender is still not great. It's okay. You can always achieve it in the same way that, you know, a good sculptor can use any tool, but I mean, it's just not there. Like Blender is missing so many features, but also including the more underlying things like just the poly count isn't great, and like you can't take it up to the same poly count. There's still tons of bugs in it. Like if you do a stroke on a mesh and then you want to undo, it takes ages. So there's tons of issues like that, but also the brush does simply not respond to the same level as it does in ZBrush. So for me, Blender is a fantastic tool if you sculpt once in a while. Let's say you're a hard surface modeler and once in a while you need some sculpting. Let's say you're sculpting a sofa, or you're modeling a sofa, you're doing all the topology in Blender, UVs, all that, but then you need to just break up the cushions a bit and, you know, that kind of stuff. Or if you're sculpting a gun and there's an organic pad on it, you know, something like that. But in terms of, it's not a competitor to ZBrush, and it never, ever, ever will, unless they're investing an insane amount of R&D into that. And it would be insane if it was the same level as ZBrush, because ZBrush is basically it's a specialized tool, and Blender is not a specialized tool. So yeah, I don't see that happening. There's also no indication that it is happening. Though it's not really. They aren't really updating the sculpting tools at any significant rate. Yeah, so let's talk about quickly about the Black Friday sale as well. Someone mentioned the intro to sculpting. I just want to show you the brand new site, or brand new optimized site. Sculpting. Here's a course that I made some years ago now. Intro to Sculpting here. Man, such a fast site. And this is one I always recommend for sculpting. Just we cover everything you need to know. You can see the all the chapters down here. So we go through all the different things from very simple tools to fairly advanced concepts. So there are two courses I recommend. It's a bunch of courses I recommend, but I recommend Intro to Sculpting as a beginner, just to get started with this. I really cover a lot of stuff I'm talking about now. And then Intro to Anatomy, which goes in depth into both of these ones. So I'm going to be sending a link to both of these in the chat right now. You guys can check them out. They're 50% off during Black Friday. So yeah, just have a look at this. And also just feel free to browse the site. Just tons of really, really cool products there. We have almost 40,000 products on sale, which is nuts to me. It's like 35,000, 39,500 or something like that. So it's pretty mad. In my initial days, Flipnomos was my main inspiration to start sculpting. I love you guys. Because of you, I'm working in the industry today for 6 years as a character artist. Wow, thanks a lot. That's amazing. Thank you so much. That's genuinely really inspiring to hear. It's always fun to hear real world stories like this, because when Morten and I are working, we're working in isolation. We don't. It's not like we're sitting with a bunch of people from the community around us like that, because we're working from home and all that. So it's really hard to get to really hear real world things like that. So thank you so much. Yeah, one thing I'm enjoying about the Black Friday sale is that we can actually have some significant discounts. This is what I'm seeing in general for the Black Friday sales for the last few years. So for the general environment, like in the world, that Black Friday used to be 50% off awesome TVs, and now it's 25% off air fryers or something. Like the deals just aren't very good. So it's genuinely really cool that we can have the like actually 50% off. Some are way higher than that as well. All our own products are 50% off. So all the Flipmoment's exclusives, the ones that Morten and I have made, are directly, or we worked with freelancers to create. So all these are 50% off, but also a lot more tutorials and products on the site as well. Now let's see, are we making him sad or evil? I think we're gonna make him a bit evil here. Or a bit sad maybe, yeah, a bit sad. Let's try to make him a little bit sad. So the cool thing about not having symmetry is that we can just do all sorts of stuff. I'm new to ZBrush, and I was wondering if you would pose out your model first or pose it once we're done with sculpting. It's a really good question. For any kind of production, you want to definitely post this afterwards with a rig. The issue with posting this first is you have to do stuff without symmetry, and that's really, really, really annoying. For studies, if you're studying a figure, meaning you have an asymmetrical character, I really recommend doing that without symmetry. So you do that as early as you can, just in post, because you're going to learn a lot from that. But there's so many things in CG, it just depends on what your goal is with that. You're going to learn a lot more, but it's going to take a lot longer. So for portfolio pieces, keep it symmetrical for as long as possible. And then if you want to post it, you can use something like Mixamo. You can just write this down as well. Mixamo. And this is an auto rig. So you can just upload this. It's owned by Adobe, so you can just upload it there and get auto rigged, and there are tons of animations and such. You can download the rig as well. You can start to experiment with this in something like Blender. I think it might work in Maya as well. I'm not 100% sure. At least I've used that a bit in Blender, and you can play around with that. I always prefer to do auto rigging instead of doing posing, because posing in ZBrush, even though you can do it with something like Transpose Master, it just sucks compared to doing this with a proper rig. But of course, then you have to know a bit about rigging as well. But it's also a skill that's worth learning. Not saying you need to be a rigger, because that's a very, very specialized skill, but be able to put up a skeleton and do some controls and some weight painting is legitimately really, really, really handy for a character artist, just so you can pose your characters. I'm a sculptor started in Blender, now working in ZBrush. The modeling seems less intuitive in ZBrush. Do you think it's worth learning another program just for hard surface? I think any modeler should learn another 3D software. I think it's really, really, really bad if you only know how to use ZBrush. This is what we have called ZBrush cowboys, and this is just a real problem. If you want to work with, like, if you want to do anything but just work for yourself, meaning you're a hobbyist, if you're a hobbyist, then whatever, then whatever works for you. But if you want to work in any kind of collaborative environment, I highly, highly recommend that you pick up either Maya or Blender. Blender is great for modeling. The reason is just you have so much control over everything you're doing there in terms of the poly count and all that. Modeler, for instance, in ZBrush it's okay. You can do tons of cool concepting with it, but for any kind of real world modeling that needs actual proper topology, any kind of optimization, you just need something else. You genuinely don't have enough control in ZBrush for that. Like for me, I'm not a ZBrush lover. I'm a ZBrush user. I use ZBrush as a tool because ZBrush is a great tool, but if there is a tool that's better, I will be using that. ZBrush for me is a sculpting tool, and that's it. It's not a modeling tool per se. It's an organic modeling tool, which is phenomenal at what it is, but it's you just really need another software as well. But yeah, particularly if you want to be working in any kind of production as well. Then if you want to work commercially, then I highly recommend picking up Maya. Blender is great, but just it's not even about being good or bad. It's just about if a studio is using the software, it's just easier for you to jump right in. But there's no dogma here. I think so many people are locked in their ways when it comes to software that no, you need to use Maya or you need to use ZBrush or whatever. Some people are sculpting beautiful characters with a mouse in Blender, right? Like you can do crazy stuff with very little if you're industrious enough and if you're passionate about it. But I also think it's useful to use the right tool for the job. So no studio is going to really use Blender for sculpting, for instance. It's just a ZBrush job. That's just what ZBrush is for. It's just about getting the job done fast and on budget. So use the right tools for the job. I like where this guy's going now. I'm having more fun with him now than I had before. My fear is being seen as a noob for using Blender for hard surface. I mean, that's just not. If somebody's judging you for that, they just tell me and I'll be under their bed. that this is something that Blender is a phenomenal tool for hard surface. Blender is arguably one of the best tools for hard surface. Blender it's always been good for hard surface modeling, but it used to be, before 2.8, it was UX challenged. It was hard to use, and it was seen more as a hobbyist tool. But really, in the last 5-6 years, it's just being used on all sorts of productions. It's really cool. Often not as the main tool, meaning it's not like you're replacing Maya or Houdini as the main pipeline tool. But who cares? It's used a lot for modeling and such, just because it's great at that. So I don't think anyone will judge you for using Blender for hard surface. It's a really, really, really good tool, particularly if you look at add-ons like box cutter and such is just the sickest tools ever made for hard surface. For me, Maya is a really, really, really good hard surface modeler as well. I still prefer Maya. I find I have more control in Maya. Maya got a lot better about 10 years ago. It was really crappy before for modeling, but then they acquired a plugin called Nex, and they integrated that as a modeling toolkit, and it's great. If you do UVs, I really, really, really think you need something else in Blender though. I recommend, like if you're not using Maya, then I recommend what on earth is that called? Rism. Yeah, Rism. Rism is great. Rism is a really, really, really good tool for UV mapping. Maya is also good, but Blender is just not great. Blender is really terrible for UVs. It feels like going back into, it feels like going back to a tool from like 2006. It's really, really, really antiquated. Moved over to Blender from Maya for studio work. Still can't get used to the seemingly very random hotkeys after months. Yeah, that's an issue. I spoke with Andrew Price years ago when he was in London, and he kept comparing Blender to learning the piano. I think that's pretty correct, because it is so hotkey based. It's for me, Blender is needlessly hotkey based. This is one of the things about Maya that's really good. It's not really hotkey based. It's marking menu based, or you can use marking menus, meaning you just hold down a single key, and you can now access all the modeling tools. So even if you haven't used Maya for a long time, as long as you remember that key, you can still model. While in Blender, if you haven't used it for a year, you're going to have a hard time modeling because it's so hotkey based. That's one of the things I dislike the most about it, because it's really fast if you're using it daily, but so is Maya, because you even if you aren't using marking menus, you can just hotkey stuff there as well. I don't like that it forces you to use hotkeys. So really one of my biggest gripes, because it really seems like it's random at times, where like how it's constructed. The UX for me still feels very open sourcey. It's one of those things, like Maya is clunky and the menus look old and such, but the UX I think is still fairly good. It's built around conventions. Yes, it can absolutely use some modern update, but it's still fairly logical where stuff is and how to find things and such. So for me, I think it's just an easier interface to use, but I know there are people who will fight me in the street for that as well. So there is that. It's not an objective thing, right? If it's better or worse, but I think for me, it's a lot easier to use Maya long term than it is a Blender, simply because Blender is very memory based. You have to memorize a lot of things. Well, in Maya, it's in shelves and such, or it's just in marquee menus. Actually, I want to show you guys a product related to that. Not to just make this a product thing, but we made a course some years ago, switching to Blender for advanced artists here. This is, or for experienced artists. This is one I made some years ago, which is I think this is a really good one. This is made for people who they're used to using Maya, like any 3D software really, but specifically Maya. I come from Maya, right? And this is just covering all that. This is just how we just go through how to build this at the end, and then we just go through all the different parts. So this is a course I wish I had when I started with Blender, because man, there's a lot of Googling. There's a lot of stuff around where you just have to, you come from Maya, you know all the hotkeys, you know all the conventions, and then you watch tutorials and they were like, all right, so this is how we install Blender, and this is what a polygon is. And you're like, I've been using Blender since like near the last millennia, right? I'm fine, I don't need to know that. Just tell me how the extrude tool works and how navigation works and what the outliner is and how I can animate something, right? And that's what we're focusing on in intro, or switching to Blender for experienced artists. We also have some YouTube videos on that as well, so you can check those out as well. Those are in the gallery from the link I sent over there as well. Yeah, in Maya, Embre saying, I never not missed the Maya pivot tools. Yeah, the pivot tools in Maya are they're just better. They're just easier to work with. It's like having it's almost like if the 3D cursor was better. You just have, it's just a lot easier to work with. You just hold on the D key and you can snap to a vert, edge, polygon, and now you get a direction with that. So it's just a lot more intuitive to work with. But at the same time, there are tons of stuff in Blender that's a lot more intuitive to work with as well. Like for instance, how it's gesture based in terms of like the you know, if you want to move something, you just hit the G key and you just move stuff right away. There's one less step. In Maya, you have to hit the W key and then you have to move it from there. So it's one less step in that regard. And the viewport is 1,000 times better in Blender than Maya. The Maya viewport is very, very, very clunky and old. And same if you want to do something, like if you want to render something out that's not insanely high end. So let's say you want to render out like let's say it's a kids TV show or something like that, or just something simpler that doesn't need all sorts of crazy stuff. You could do it in Eevee. You render the whole thing out and you basically don't have render times. But if you've got to render in Maya, you have to use Arnold, and my lord, Arnold is overkill for this kind of stuff. You could of course use like the softer render in Arnold, but in Maya, but man, that stuff is old. So in Maya, you have either the best render engine ever made, which is Arnold. Arnold is phenomenal. Arnold is not like a crappy thing kind of made by Autodesk. It's made I think it was made by Sony way back in the day and used for productions, and it's still one of the best engines used in productions. A lot of the main studios are using it. So a lot of the Hollywood films and commercials are rendered directly in Arnold. So it's great. So it's like you either have Hollywood VFX quality, it's a competitor to RenderMan, which is what Pixar made and what Disney is using for stuff. So you either have that, or you have like a software render engine from like 20 years ago. You have nothing in between. Well, in Blender, you very much have something in between. You have Eevee, and that is brilliant. Oftentimes you can't tell the difference between Eevee and Cycles, depending of course what it is. For skin, oh yes, you can tell, but for a lot of hard surface stuff, metals and such, metals with reflections, it can honestly be hard to tell the difference. I wish the Flip Normal store had lists to save products, as it would make it easier to find these later. Yeah, this is an interesting one. This is we had a rebuild of the website 2 years ago now, like about 2 years ago, and one of the things that got killed off in that rebuild, purely down to budgetary reasons, was wish lists. It's something we really want to bring back. Another one is written reviews. We have ratings now, which is still a nice upgrade for not having it. But yeah, I really wish we had wish lists. That would have been really nice. It's one of those things that is strangely expensive to build. Like we've got it budgeted down and we have everything. The job is basically ready to start, but it's And it's an expensive thing to do. The development is just very, very, very expensive. So yeah, would love to have wishlist back. That's one of my most requested features, like for me, not from like people like yourself, but just like I want this. Because we use the site a lot as well. Like we browse it a lot and we use it. So we buy products from our own store as well. So because it sounds a bit like we're money laundering here, but it's like if we need a reference pack and we need to use it for something or a 3D model for a project, you know, we first use our own website, and of course we have to pay for our creators. So we use our own website as well as customers, which is pretty weird. But I mean, we have a lot of the same requests as people have. Can actually show the Maya tools for this. Might be interesting, just like to see how good the pivot tools actually are. Not that that's like the most interesting stuff, but it's when it comes to like core modeling tools like the pivot tools and such, it's one of those things that it's not one of those sexy features. Grease pencil is a sexy feature, EEV and the viewport is a sexy feature. Well, pivot tools is not, but it's one of those things you use all the time. It's very, 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 very useful. It's like how if you were to be in construction, a new power tool is cool. Like it can go make tons of fun sounds, and it can drill through walls and all. That's cool. But what you really want a lot of times is just a good hammer, right? Stuff you use every single day and stuff that just fits in your hand and just works with you. And I think it's really important to not underestimate the power of simple tools. I find that when you're working in 3D, you use the same few tools over and over and over again. It's one of the reasons I'm spending a lot of time making my brushes really nice, because you use, like in this whole stream so far, I've used literally one brush. I think maybe I used the move brush a little bit, but it's basically one brush for the whole thing. So you better make sure you pick a good brush for that. Let's see if Maya's loaded. Hey, it has. The thing with Maya though is it takes ages to load. So what this I can just explain what's going on here, right? If you want to make a new object, you hold on Shift right mouse button and you go boom, and you have all the primitives available, and you can just do this Shift right mouse button cube, boom. You want to have modeling tools, you just go into a component and you just hold on Shift right mouse button and boom, you have all the tools here. Go into vertex mode, same thing here. So you have all the tools readily available, and the only thing you have to remember is Shift right mouse button, which is nothing is selected, Shift right mouse button in object mode, Shift right mouse button here, and it's just so intuitive to use this. If you want to delete something, you go boop, or merge something, you delete something, you go boom. You can't even see what I'm doing because it's so fast. It's just a very, very refined tool. Then if you want to rotate this, you can just rotate this, and then if you want to move the pivot to an edge, you just hold on the D key and it just snaps to this right away. So it's just very, very, very intuitive to do this. So now if you want to move it here, you just go boop, and it just works. So this works, of course, no matter where this is in space. Like if you were to like freeze the transform for this one, then you would still have this you could still just align this to whatever you want to. So handy. This stuff here is a lot harder to do in Maya. Or in Blender. Of course you can do it. It's just not the same. It's always like that with, it's pretty annoying actually when you're suggesting things for Blender, like things like this, and they're like, oh, but you could just make a cube with, hold on Shift and A and just make it from there. Yeah, you can, but it's just not the same. You can of course do most of the same things in all different software, but it's just not the same. It's just a lot more intuitive with certain things in Maya. Of course, certain things are just objectively better. The UV tools in Blender are just worse in pretty much every single measurable way. So we're just going over this, but no flip normal stream without a little bit of a Blender rant. But yeah, I'm not even a Maya fanboy. I mean, I don't think there is such a thing as a Maya fanboy, because I find that people who use there are a lot of Blender fanboys. There are people who love Blender and they're very vocal about it. And so if you're criticizing a feature, they might get a bit defensive about that. And if you criticize a feature in Maya, people go like, yeah, cool, That's correct. This can be criticized, and this could be a lot better, and they'll be the first to criticize the tool. So it's very, very different coming with feature suggestions for Maya versus feature suggestions for Blender. Probably also has to do with, since Blender is, I think there are a lot more hobbyists for Blender and a lot more professionals using Maya. So people who are professionals, they're weirdly enough a bit less passionate about it, because they often see 3D just as a job, or did you see it as a tool, and then they're like, yeah, this tool can do this stuff. And I think a lot of people who use Blender, if you're hobbyist about it, it's often, you often put your identity down into it. I saw this with Modo as well back in the day, that people loved Modo, and they used whatever tools were in Modo to create art. And then you have people who loved 3D, and they would use whatever tool was available in the world of 3D. They wouldn't, if Modo was a great modeler, they would model in that, but it was terrible for rendering, they would render in like V-Ray or something for Max or for Maya. So I think there is something like that as well for Blender. Like very, very few people would have Maya user in their bio on Twitter, or like they just don't have any, they just don't have any feelings towards that either way. Yeah, the thing with Blender is you often need a lot of hotkeys, or sorry, not a lot of add-ons as well. But I mean, Blender is also an insanely good tool for modeling, and it's just a great tool. It's not even as a good or a bad tool. It's just there are always things that can be better with it. And I like a lot of other people, the way I choose my tools is, can I do the job? If Maya is better for UV mapping, so I'm using that. The moment Blender becomes better for UV mapping, I'm using Blender. Like, I have no affiliation, or I have no care for that whatsoever. About any software loyalty. I just use what is the best tool for the job. Like, of course, within a budget as well. And of course, also within how much time does it take to learn the tool. Maybe Houdini is better for certain things, and then Maya, well, it definitely is. But I'm not going to spend money on Houdini, and I'm not going to spend time learning Houdini, at least not at the moment. So then, like, yeah, you're not going to do that. Or if you need to do some UV mapping once in a while, you're probably not going to subscribe to Rism just to make that faster. You also have that with different software, where even if something is faster to do in a software, it may not be faster to do it in that software. I had this when I started VFX about 10 years ago, where I was a Modo user, but I also used Maya. The Modo was my jam. That was really what I enjoyed using. And I started using it a bit here and there for different things. And then slowly, sure, Maya got better, but slowly but surely, I just moved over to Maya full-time. And I'm still basically there now, because even if something was faster to do in Modo, you have to export it out and you have to import it in. And it's not like that necessarily takes time, but it's what I call the mystery variable. If you, let's say you need to just update something quickly in Maya, then you just update that. Let's say you have to change a name or something in a hierarchy, or you just have to add an edge loop, or you quickly change the UVs for something, easy peasy. But if you have to do this in Modo, you don't necessarily know what's gonna, or in Blender, right? You don't necessarily know what's gonna screw up. It can be that when you're exporting something like we call it NPC primvars. It's basically tags that are within the model. It can be something like subdivide this specific piece, or tell this piece here to not have motion blur, whatever it can be. And suddenly you've removed a tag, and then you're in trouble, because now that you don't know what's going to break, because now you only see this at render time. So suddenly the mystery variable is a massive, massive thing. So I just sucked it up and just started using Maya full-time, really because of that. Particularly if you're dealing with more professional assets or production assets, where you're dealing with, you have tons of dependencies there. Let's say you have a character. A character in, I'm not sure about games, of course, but for film, it's not just a character. It's a fully published asset, which probably will have tons of blend shapes associated with it. It's going to have UV sets. It's going to have all sorts of stuff, probably different resolutions as well, like LODs. So you have the render mesh, and you have the anim mesh, and you have different versions of this. So the moment you're starting to screw around with this in software, you're just potentially in trouble. And that's what I mean, potentially. You don't necessarily know, because that's hence the word mystery variable. Well, if you just keep everything in one software, you just load it up, you do your changes, and you save it or you export it, publish it, and then, yeah, you're in a good spot. This is one of the main things we keep talking about as well when it comes to software versus software. For production, it really doesn't matter. It just use whatever is in a production, because it's not necessarily obvious what makes something better for software, or what software makes something better for production. Please touch on 3D Code a bit. I have nothing to touch on. I don't use 3D Code at all. It seems like a good software. I know some people like it for sculpting. It seems like a perfectly capable software. I have no reason to really use it, to be honest, because all the stuff it can do, I have alternatives for. For sculpting, I have ZBrush. For retopology, I have Maya/Blender. For painting, I have Painter. So yeah, personally, I don't have any reason to use it. There was also some weird controversy about it, like about 10 years ago or something, where you couldn't make art that was offensive to God. Like there was some, like a blasphemy clause in the actual terms of service. That I'm fairly certain that was removed after the controversy there. But man, that was weird. Made me want to make blasphemic images in 3D Code. Houdini seems superior in Sims every way. Is there even a competitor? Nope. If you're a Houdini user today, or if you're an effects artist today, you're using Houdini. There are of course specialized tools like Androgen and such for different things, but really, I mean, for games I don't know, but for film it's all Houdini. There are some in-house solutions as well, like the different studios they use different solutions. Like when I started Framestore, they had their own effects solution, but they've gone over to Houdini because it's just the best tool for simulation, not just pure like rigid body simulation, meaning you have tons of marbles and they're falling down a staircase, but stuff like muscle sims or creating fire or wind or smoke or like procedural modeling. Like Houdini is an absolute beast. It's Houdini is a very, very, very good tool. Even for rendering, a lot of people are using Houdini because they like an alternative has been Katana, which is a node-based rendering software. It's not a rendering software. It's a software you can use as a final packaging software, in a sense, where you import all your caches, your animations, and all that kind of stuff, and then you attach a render engine to it. We load in a render engine like RenderMan or Arnold or whatever you want to use, and then you render in there. But a lot of people are moving over to Houdini for this as well because it's so procedural. So you can very easily reuse light rigs and you can easily load in materials and such. So Houdini is fantastic for this. You can it also supports the main render engines as well. So a lot of studios will use, for instance, Arnold in Houdini, and it's just great. A lot of people use Maya before, like way back in the day, but not anymore for this. Maya is not used a lot for rendering, unless it's a very specific custom version of it for a studio or something. But I think some studios actually gone back to Maya for certain things like that, weirdly enough. But a lot of it is now being done in Houdini. I'm enjoying how this guy is going now. Like he's I'm having more fun with him now that I'm just kind of YOLOing him, just going over and just having fun with this brush, just trying to make him feel a bit more organic. I want to make him more planar as well, just make him a bit more interesting. I think it's really, really, really important to have fun when you're doing 3D. I see this a lot where people are doing portfolio pieces and they're just doing almost pieces that have been recommended to them by a teacher or a mentor or something like that, instead of asking them, do you enjoy this one? Are you actually having fun with the piece you're making? And if you're not, it's very hard to continue that. It's very difficult to be inspired to spend 3 months on a portfolio piece if you're not enjoying it. But if you are enjoying it, it's the opposite. Then you can wait to work more in it, particularly if it's on a stage, which is where it's improving fast. So I think it's so important that that you're enjoying what you're working on. Just adding some asymmetry to them. Are you comfortable using the curved brushes in ZBrush? I am not. I find them to be tricky to work with. I use them sometimes, but yeah, I try to avoid the curved brushes, to be honest. I think they're less than ideal, but yeah. Just trying to make the design a bit more interesting now. Sometimes I play around with this. I just take something like this and I just move it up to one side and just see what works as well. I'll try to offset his head a little bit. It's almost like he's been dropped. Yeah, curves in Blender are really good. One of the cool things about Blender for curves is you can twist them, but you can also scale them at specific points, or the vertices can be scaled as well. We made a reel about this recently, so if you want, you can check that out. I guess you are already on our YouTube channel, so you can check out one of the latest shorts we did. It's called something like Good Blender Hair Tools or something, and you can see that my technique for that. It's really, really, really good. It's for me, it's by far the best way to make something like stylized hair, because you can. It's non-destructive, so you can change the thickness of it, you can change the position at the same time, but also you can twist it, which is so useful. I haven't seen any other software you can actually twist and scale a curve like you can in Blender. This is a completely new thing. It's not new in Blender, but it's something I have not seen any other software do. I'm not sure about the mechanics of it, like how specifically that can happen compared to other software. But it's there, so it's absolutely fantastic. This is what I mean. Just use whatever tool you want. Use whatever tool is good for that. I prefer Maya for modeling. For stylized hair, I absolutely prefer Blender. I like far over ZBrush as well. I don't think ZBrush is good for hair because of the how clunky the tools are. You can of course drag something out and play around with that, but I really prefer Blender for it. Also because if you want to change it, it's just difficult to do that. All right. Looking at the character from the top view is really useful, because then you can see things you wouldn't otherwise see. So I highly recommend doing that. For one thing I'm seeing here, for instance, I want to make his nose a lot more crooked. I'm working on an anime style character, and recommendations for how to shade it. This depends on how advanced you are for shading, but also depends on the software you're using, but look into cell shading for this. So if you're using Blender, search for cell shading Blender, or you can find tons of tutorials for that. The cell shading is essentially something that instead of it being soft, like the surface looking soft, it just has like instead of it just being a nice gradient, it will be blocked out like this. You have these harsh lines, which is really cool. You can do tons of stuff with that. If you're using Blender, also play around with grease pencil. But yeah, it depends on your software. Oh, I'm using the wrong clay tubes brush here. This was looking way too harsh. So because I haven't integrated my clay tubes brush yet into ZBrush, because this is something I made just like 2 days ago. So it's still a very fresh one. Why is XGen file saving so complex? Man, I don't know. XGen is difficult. XGen is very powerful and it's used a lot in productions. But man, I have no love for XGen. It's clunky. It really feels like it was, like you can actually see that it was kind of made for a studio. It wasn't kind of, was made for a studio. It was made by Disney. And internal tools are very different from commercial tools. When you're doing internal things, you really just care about how does it work or not. You don't really have a lot of edge cases you have to necessarily work around, or you don't have to bundle up in a beautiful interface and stuff like that. You're often building for a very specific software environment, and you're just not considering the end user as much as you're considering the end product. And man, XGen feels like that. So XGen is powerful, but one of the reasons it's so bad is because you never know when something breaks, you never really know what's up. Something just breaks and you're like, cool, I guess I have to rebuild the whole bloody thing now because it's just broken. So if you want, it's still one of the best hair tools, which doesn't say a lot about the other hair tools, or I guess says a lot about the other hair tools, because hair is just terrible in 3D. What a lot of people are going towards now is actually Houdini hair, or grooms in Houdini. But then you need Houdini, and you need to render in Houdini, which is also a pain, because then you have to move your entire workflow over. So whenever I'm doing hair and fur, I'm still doing that in Maya. The Blender hair tools are getting better, but man, they're still not there. Better doesn't mean great. You're still missing a lot of features. Hair is just something that just genuinely sucks in 3D. There's not like a one solution that you should be using for like how sculpting improved character modeling, and character modeling before really sucked, and you had to do this with polygons. Like you have to do poly modeling, and it was just miserable to do. And then ZBrush came out and Mudbox came out, and sculpting just got a lot better. It became fun to do characters. While for hair, we don't have anything like that. Before, making characters was almost like making them out of like chicken wire and such, and just wires, and you had to bend things, and you would just break your fingers and cut them all the time and all such. That was like the equivalent version of that. It was really, really, really annoying to deal with. And then ZBrush came and it became fun. You can play with this. I can play with this now. That's what I'm doing now. There's nothing technical about what I'm doing now. It's all just play. And that's where Groom currently is. It feels like you're making a chicken wire groom. You're not playing around with hairstyles. If you could, you could just kind of like, why can't you just say that, oh, this part here is where the hair is supposed to be, and it just makes like a quick groom thing here, and you can just play around with different forces, add wind that goes from here and just blows around, and you can just play around with this. You generally can't do that. There are tools that kind of emulate this a little bit, but really not to any serious degree when it comes to play. And hair is fundamentally playful. I know this as somebody who used to have hair. as an ex-hairer, I can say that. it's a playful thing. Yeah, a tricky thing with XGen is that it's very picky. Unless you're seen as super clean and you know what you're doing, and you set up your environment correctly, meaning you go into project, set project. Unless you've done that and you know what Maya is and how Maya is node-based and how everything is clean, and make sure you don't use XGen on a Tuesday, because that's obviously you should use XGen on Tuesday. And gotta grind up some garlic and throw them in the air and use sulfur. Like, all these things are really important. And if you don't do these things correctly, XGen is just gonna crash. So if you do them correctly, still might crash. So it's really, really annoying to work with. I never work with something which is as temperamental as XGen. The tricky thing is that since it's a bit hard to actually work with as well, unless you're an expert at XGen, you don't really know what's wrong. Meaning, you don't know if you screwed something up by, did you set the project incorrectly, or are you wearing the wrong socks, or is there something actually wrong with XGen? Is there just a legitimate bug and you have to restart it? I had this before. This is actually for Intro to Maya. Made a really nice groom for the Spartan style helmet, Greek style helmet, and closed the software. Then you open it for a few weeks, open back up again, it was broken. It's just something broke while Maya was closed, and it was just really annoying. Or you update the version of Maya like I think I've updated, this was around my 2020 0 to 2020.1, and that also broke all my grooms. I had to find a new version to download that. Real pain in the ass. So yeah. Olivia, hey. No Morton here, but hello. Good seeing you here. Yeah, well, no, 3D software can be temperamental, but it's nothing like XGen. XGen is the most temperamental thing I've ever used. It's a real displeasure to use that. And just a little reminder that we have a very nice little Black Friday sale. Very little nice, with 40,000 products on sale. So again, I just love using the site now because it's fast. Hey. If you look at the former streams we had, you can see that I'm hiding how slow the site was because it was really slow. It'd be like, let's look at the cool products, and I open them one tab at a time, but now I can legitimately just go like, boom, good stuff. This is a product I really like. This is one that Morton made recently. I'll send a link to this one. This is it's a portfolio kit. If somebody used the lighting scenes we had before, this is a new version of this specifically for Blender. Probably want to make this for Arnold as well, but it's basically drag and drop your model into it, and it just looks great. And tons of scenes here. It's made for people who aren't super techy when it comes to lighting, but they're really good modelers or texture artists or something like that, and they just want to make their renders look nice. Slow is fast. Yeah, that's what I keep saying all the time. It's I really think that by working in a slow fashion, you're working in a fast way. So by working slowly, you're setting up a good foundation for things, and you get to think things through, and by doing that, you end up with a nice end result. I think there is also like if anyone's in Modern Family, you have the Phil Dunphy character. He says something similar in it. I think he says, "Slow is smooth, smooth is fast." I like that. I heard that way after I was using it as well. The slow is fast is something I just came up with by myself, I think, but it seems like Phil Dunphy might have beat me about 10 years ago. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That's basically the way I'm thinking about it. That if you're like slow is fast is something I've done for retopology. To explain this one is let's say retopology doesn't just do it here, and what a lot of people do, they just start with here. They're like doing this kind of stuff, right? They just starting up with this, and then they end up with a lot of troubles because they don't know how to connect this kind of stuff up. What I'm doing is slowly building up some volumes here, or some lines, slowly building this up here. Slowly just thinking about these things. And then once everything is just slowly connected up, you can go up, 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 and you can just connect things up. We actually had a short reel about this recently as well, just showing how to do this, my approach for this, and this is so useful, just really focusing on that. But the same with sculpting as well. If you were to build a proper foundation, it's going to take a lot of time, meaning you really get the bones right, and get the skin right and all that, and there's no magical moment where everything just comes together. It's just iterative over a lot of hours. What a lot of people mess up as well when it comes to sculpting is they're looking at characters like this, like, oh, cool brushstrokes and such, and then they're just trying to brushstroke it to death instead of thinking about that. Well, I've actually spent a lot of time with the anatomy on this guy here. The anatomy isn't perfect anyway, but I've at least spent a lot of time on it, so it's at least somehow refined. The shapes are still somehow refined, instead of just going straight to cool brushstrokes. Cool brushstrokes are very cool, but cool brushstrokes also are very messy, so unless you know what you're doing, it can be quite challenging to work with that. Yeah, it's akin to the expression work smarter, not harder. Absolutely. I think you should do both. I think you should work hard and smart. Though in the beginning, when you're learning something, and just brute force it. If you're learning to sculpt, I don't think you should try to be like the whole smooth is fast, right? Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. I don't think that's important. I think what's important when you're learning anything is just do it a lot. The way I think about it, we can actually talk a bit about this, is since I'm doing a lot of teaching, right, with mentorship and such, you need 3 things to learn anything. You need quality instructions, just pure instructions. You need to know a muscle is a string that goes from here to here and has volume, like whatever, right, that has tendons and all this kind of stuff. You need to know these kind of things, quality instructions. But quality instructions are nothing unless you practice. You need mileage. You just need to practice a lot. And of course, correct practice. And then you need feedback. And the famous QMF, I suppose. So the feedback is really important as well, because if you keep practicing but you're practicing wrong, you're in trouble. So it's really important to do all these parts. And as you progress and you learn more, you can be more elegant with how you're working. And of course, you know, if you might as well get good routines in from the beginning. If you learn how to read topologies, you might as well just do it correctly, right? Don't just be stupid about it. But at the same time, the most important thing you can do in the beginning, I really think, is just get the work done. Just work. Just really get the mileage under your belt. And then once you run into issues, then you can find more tutorials for things and you can figure out these kind of things. So you really just need to work a lot. It's the same thing if you try to, let's say you're trying to get good at a video game. You can't just watch videos all the time. You need to play the game to get better, and then you can get feedback on it. I'm doing this right now. I'm learning. I'm playing Age of Empires 4. I mentioned this in last stream as well. And you can't just watch videos on Age of Empires and just improve, right? You have to play a lot of games and you have to improve every single game and iterate on that. But like with that, right, it's the same thing. You need quality instructions, meaning you need to know how the game works, how the different civs are working, different strategies. Then you need to practice a lot. And then you need to feedback, either get feedback from other people or feedback yourself on your own strategies. Same thing with when you're dealing with 3D. You just really need to practice a lot. I would much rather see somebody practice imperfectly, but practice, meaning you're sculpting or doodling around or doing anything like that, than to be too hesitant, too anxious because you're not doing this correctly. Doesn't matter. You just got to get cracking, just work, just produce things, and you can always improve things later on. Sure, spend time to make sure you're just not doing things in a completely stupid way, so you're not like harming yourself or something. If you want to sculpt, invest in a good tablet. Well, invest in a tablet. Like, doesn't have to be a great one. Just get a tablet and get at least a computer that can somehow run your software. But you know, the most important thing is that you're just practicing a lot all the time. Have you done any real world sculpting with clay, with stones and such? I've done it with clay, but not with stone. I don't like it. I think one of the reasons is because I'm so used to sculpting in ZBrush that I know what I can get done so fast in ZBrush within a few minutes. Within a few minutes, I can have a decent anatomical base. Perfect, absolutely not. But it's enough that, you know, it would have the arms and legs and such, right? And maybe even some bare muscles or something. But sculpting with clay, man, that's a different thing. Then you need to make a base and you need to cut wire and you need to do all this stuff. Get your hands dirty, you know, all these kind of things. So for me, I don't like it. I think I would enjoy portrait sculpting that I haven't really done too much of, but that's a bit of a different thing. But yeah, I know some people love doing that. Not really for me, I think. Yeah, long nails would make working with clay pure hell. Yeah. Just gonna try to break up the symmetry here as well. Trying to break up the center line a little bit. I like where he's going, but there is something that doesn't feel right. I think it's with his shoulders. For the hands, I will 100% sculpt this with symmetry because I'm not gonna sculpt this twice. what's really important when you're sculpting the back is to get the shoulder blade right. So we have 2 lines we basically need. We need this line here, and we need this line here. If you have these 2 lines, you can really sculpt the back. If you don't have these lines, you're going to be in trouble forever. Like, there is no way to really sculpt the back unless you really have these 2 lines. One is the medial border of the scapula, which is this guy here, and basically inner border of the scapula towards the center, and then this one here is the spine of the scapula, and this goes up here, and this goes into the acromion process, and this is where the clavicles attach. This is why this is so important. This is also really useful when you're sculpting real people based on real world reference, because it's often really difficult to know what's going on. If you watched earlier in the stream, you can see I was talking about how to improve your sculpting. And one of the ways is to sculpt from life or from real world references, not just what I'm doing now, which is imaginary stuff. And you're going to see there's a big discrepancy between theoretical anatomy and real life practical anatomy. Or like practical people, like what people actually look like. So I think it's very, very important to understand the real world anatomy. And when you're looking at a back and you think you know the anatomy, you're going to realize you don't really know the anatomy, because it's really difficult. The back is very, very, very difficult to get right. The back and the forearm are 2 of the hardest parts, because there are a lot of moving parts, but also when stuff articulates, it's hard. So just by getting this shape here in and this shape here in, you're going to just be in a much, much better spot. One thing that's been really nice recently has been after they released the iPad version of ZBrush, that so it's a legitimately good version of that. I was on the beta team, and we released the video on how to use ZBrush for the iPad, I think the day it released or something, the day after, and it's just a really enjoyable software to work with. It feels like ZBrush, but just on the iPad. So it's really, really fun to play around with that. You can do this on the underground or bus or train or whatever you want to, or just in your living room where you don't have to be on your computer physically. So ZBrush for iPad is a legit version of it. I have a version of, my girlfriend has a version of the iPad which is technically not supported. It's from 2018. It's before the M1 chips were there, but it's still somehow runs okay. Yeah, it's missing some features, but it's good. It's legitimately a good version. There's also something nice about sculpting on a screen as well. I'm usually sculpting with just a regular pen tablet, which is what I'm doing now. And yeah, it's good fun. Also, it feels a bit more casual. Like, working on a computer feels a bit more like work, and sculpting on an iPad is a bit more like fun. I'm really enjoying this brush. It feels so soft and nice to use, but not like a clay brush, because it's more defined than this. So yeah, having a lot of fun with this one. Can you force install the software on or out the iPad? I'm not actually sure, because I installed this in a different way for the beta, so I'm not sure how you can do that. But it ran okay on my 2018 version at least. But yeah, they do recommend that the M1 chip at least in it. That's what I have in my MacBook, and my god, what a beast of a machine that is. We had it for almost 3 years now, and it's practically like brand new. All my other Windows laptops have died after 3 years, and here I don't even feel any degradation of it. It's just great. People might not like this, but if I was if I didn't do 3D, I would probably be only using Mac ever again. I probably wouldn't be using Windows. It's just really annoying using Windows. But for 3D, you just need Windows. It's software just isn't properly supported on Mac for this. Like, even like GPU rendering, it's just much better on Windows. I have tons of issues with Apple, but my god, their products are good. Particularly the MacBook, the latest M1 to M4 series, just really good computers. pretty shocking actually if you use even the most high-end Windows computers how poor the trackpad is. You pretty much need to use an external mouse for this, but I do a lot of my editing for like the Flipmodes videos and the courses I do on my MacBook, and it's all trackpad. I even prefer it over a mouse. Just solid tech. Are there things to make you look bad? Like making skins for League of Legends or something like that. I can't imagine. I can't imagine anyone would dislike you for making skins for League of Legends. All right, zooming out, looking at the character, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. I like the overall treatment. I like the overall brushstrokiness of it. So I like that. I want to refine the shapes a bit more though. Also got to make sure he doesn't look too swole because that would be bad. I think I made a swole version of him before. Yeah, I did. Let's open up a swole and see what happens. This was from... also just going to save him out because I've not saved him out. So let's go here and do version 7. It's always hard to type because I'm wearing this bloody sculpting glove. So good fun. Let's see if anything happens here. While this is working, let's have a look at some products. We have the eye kit. This is one of my favorite products we have. This is phenomenal. This is probably one of my favorite products we have. I genuinely think this is probably the best eye kit available. This is yeah, just really solid. It's straight up drag and drop in it, and you have professional looking eyes right away. It's just good. Drag and drop in Blender, Marmoset, Maya. Good stuff. I use this for everything I do because, man, doing eyes sucks. It's just really hard to do it. Here we go. Here is Swole Dubby. This was for Intro to Anatomy, where I sculpted this dude here. I think I scaled up his yeah, I scaled him up as well and just played around with him. But yeah, Swole Dubby for you. So this is what my life has turned into. Where, you know, I used to need to do portfolio pieces for my portfolio to get jobs and all that kind of stuff, and then I, you know, didn't have to anymore. So then I started doing that. Yeah, don't do that. Dubby wants your lunch money. Yes, he does. And Dubby got his lunch money. I think my caption was, Master gave Dubby a dumbbell. Ergonomically sculpting the side of the character is just a bit harder for me. So I sometimes just mirror it. Can't do that with multiple subdivision levels though. So that's where symmetry is great. But somebody disabled my symmetry. The good thing about going over the whole model with clay brushes as well is you do get this textured feel, which even if you don't want a texture feel, can be really useful to have because you get to see which area you've worked on. It can be, one of my techniques for sculpting is always to keep working over the same areas over and over again, just really iterate on top of the character. And this way you can really see which areas you touched and which ones you haven't. The more design stuff I do, the more I have to concentrate. So the more I'm changing the design or doing more specific things, the more quiet I become. Yeah, it's really fun doing sculpting with asymmetry. Do you still use a display tablet to sculpt? Not a lot. Sometimes I do, but I find it ergonomically awkward, to be honest, because I really have to lean over and can be hard on my back sometimes if I do it for too long. Also, just because I have to move it around my desk, so I have to reorganize my desk slightly, and that's slight inconvenience, man. Don't know. But also because my tablet is already set up, so it's already working as it should. It's one of those just. It sounds silly, but if there is more friction in doing something, it's just harder to do it. So that's why my tablet is set up the way it is, my normal tablet. But yeah, it's good too. The tablets are great, like the pen tablets, but they're not. It's not objectively an improvement. I think it's objectively better in terms of my sculpting style. I have more control that way, but not in terms of actual use case. Man, W looks rough. Looks like he has been through some stuff. Which I guess in the movies he very much did go through some stuff. I'm gonna make Dobby sad. I tried to make him a bit weaker because he looks a little too swole now, so I'm gonna just push his shoulders inwards. Narrow shoulders make just somebody look weaker. Like just physically. It makes him look less intimidating. I'm also deliberately making his feet go more towards the center. If you want to make him look a bit more masculine, you can make him go a bit outwards. But yeah, that's just a bit of a personal touch. Here's a good one by Eric. Henning, professionals often say that in order to work, you need to be good and fast. Good is evident, match the quality of the industry standard. What is fast? Yeah, that's a good question. You need to be fast as well, but for me, speed is something that just comes with practice. Whenever I'm teaching people, I really, really don't think speed is something you should focus on. The way I see it is, if you can do something slowly, then you can start to speed up. But if you could do something in a crappy way but fast, nobody's going to care. So really focus on doing a good job at the core of what you want to do, and then you can start to speed things up. Ways you can speed things up could be not necessarily even using hotkeys, but can be using hotkeys. Let's say you're doing something over and over again. You're selecting a brush, you're hitting the 3 key, boom. Or you can hit B, C, whatever, right? And you can do that. That's what I'm doing here now because I haven't hotkeyed this yet. But hotkeys for me is almost like the topmost layer of that, where it's not like hotkeys are going to be the thing that speed up your work. It's going to be not really making mistakes. So let's say you do need to do a hard surface model. If you're constantly just fiddling around with topology and such, it's going to take ages. But if you see a video, for instance, of somebody who was really good at hard surface modeling, it can be honestly really fast because they're just getting straight to the point. Same with sculpting as well. You can make something in a few hours that looks great, and it's just because you're confident in your work. So focus first on understanding the thing you want to do, and then you can focus on speeding this up later on. For instance, if you want to be a character artist, and you can wing anatomy as much as you want to, but it's always going to be a case where you're going back and forth all the time because you don't really know what's up. But if you want to be good at characters, sitting down for a few days, a week, whatever, a month, and you're just learning anatomy. You're just embracing and biting the bullet, and you're going like, all right, cool. Today we'll learn the arm. Let's memorize the muscles of the arm. That way you're getting a deeper understanding of what's going on, and you can really get fast that way, because it means, let's say you're doing the chest, then you're like, all right, cool, we're doing the chest, we have the clavicular section, then we have the sternal section, and then we have the section that goes into the ribs, right? You're like, boom, easy as pie. And you just understand how things work. But if you don't have an intuitive understanding of this, or like an intuitive or intellectual understanding of it, it's really difficult. But so it's something you can practice. You need to figure out what it is you want to do, and then you can practice each specific thing. So let's say you need to export maps from ZBrush. You can sit down and you can just practice it, right? You can just sit down and do that. One thing that's really helpful, let's say it is exporting maps from ZBrush, is you can pretend to teach somebody, or you can straight up teach somebody. So let's say you're going here and you're like, oh, cool. So today, class, we are going to export maps from ZBrush. Here is the multi-exporter map. And you're like, ah, crap, it's multi-map exporter. For here, we need to export out a displacement map. And let's go through the settings. And you're going through the settings and you realize that, oh, crap, there's a lot of stuff. I don't know what's going on here. So by teaching this, you get to learn what these things are. You're like, oh, cool, let's figure out what the 32-bit map is. And just do mock teaching. You don't have to actually teach anyone. You can even record yourself in OBS or something, is what we're using for recording everything, and just pretend that you're teaching, because then you genuinely have to figure out how to do something. You can't teach something and be like, I don't really know what this button is doing. Well, turns out there is a way to figure out what this button is doing. You Google what are 32-bit maps, or how to export maps from ZBrush. So you can figure out all the things. And then over time, just by getting more familiar with the tools in ZBrush and getting more familiar with this, you just get faster. For instance, if you want to export on maps, you can just go, boom, these are the settings, set this, enable this, disable this, set this up, and you're just not going to waste any time. So it's not about how fast you're clicking. It's about understanding what the different things are. And then just do tons of projects. You can practice things in isolation. Let's say you want to get good at map baking. You just practice this. You just practice this until you understand how it works. But that's obviously really boring. So what you can do, you can just build tons of projects. And then speed will just come. Speed always just comes with time. And then there are things you can, of course, do to speed up your actual workflow, like hotkey, the things you use all the time. This is just going to make everything faster and more intuitive, and set up, like customize your interface, these kind of things. But this is like the top most level. If you were to use my interface here, you can actually find this on Flip Normals. This is for free, so it's there on a creator profile, so you can just find it here. But it's not like you're going to be able to sculpt the way I'm sculpting now just by having that. You need to understand what's up with anatomy. You need to understand the brushes. Same thing with sculpting. If you want to get really good at this, I don't think it's a good idea to go through all the brushes A to Z and just do that. I think it's useful to master a few brushes and understand how they work at a very good level. So speed, I don't think this is something you need to be too concerned with, at least not in the beginning. Focus on quality, and then speed does come. Oh, just with time. Like really, the way you improve speed is by improving your understanding of it. So you're not just moving around different polygons or screwing around with different settings and such. You can be quite precise with how you're working. I hope this was helpful. Going to try to make them a bit more gestural here. Something to note is you have the quadriceps here, and you have the inner muscle here, which goes further down than the outer muscle. So I'm trying to get a bit of more gesture going in like so now, because I don't really have any. So I'm just gonna do this, but but again without symmetry. I like what's happening with his legs here. I think that's a lot of cool stuff. But just need to refine it more. Really trying to make this curve a thing. The body is so gestural in general. Yeah, something with like back to speed, which is it's so tricky to know what speed to work with, because you're seeing all these professionals sculpt, all the tutorials and all that, and particularly on Instagram and such, where everything is about looking as good as possible. You see all these people work insanely fast, and it's all edited and it's all fake, because people, like, if you watch tutorials, most of the time it's almost a bit anticlimactic when you're watching a professional sculpt work, because it's, when I'm sculpting, it's not that I'm nailing everything here. Like every first try, I keep going over things all the time. And when I was learning, I kept, still learning, right? But when I was more of a beginner, I kept watching tutorials, and the end result looked so good. And I was trying to recreate it, and I got so bored watching the tutorials, because, and just get to the good parts, right? Just skip all the boring stuff. It turns out the boring stuff was what made the character or the portfolio piece good, because this is where you're spending a significant amount of time going over and refining the shapes and just making sure everything is working. But you have two stages of sculpting. You have where you're adding something to the sculpt, and then you have the integration stage. And I was always interested in the adding stage. This is what I'm doing now, right? I'm adding parts of the hamstrings here. Boom, cool. And then when you're doing a video of this, or for Instagram particularly, then you're skipping the integration stage, because it just looks like doodling around, or it doesn't look interesting. But you need that phase. You really, really, really need the integration phase, because if you don't have the integration phase, like meaning if somebody skips that stage in their own work, it's going to look really, really, really rough, and you're not going to understand why your art doesn't look good. It's because you're not integrating the shapes you're putting into it. I'm going to try to make him look skinnier. One way we can do this is with the pinch brush, BPI, and we can just pinch him a bit together. Just basically opposite of the inflate brush, just making him leaner. I still like the that he has muscle definition. I think that can look quite cool, but he looks too thick-sized. A lot of sculpting is really down to what field you want the character to have. Masked off his legs, and we can just experiment with this, seeing what I like. I think it's a good idea to play around with this. Just doodle around. I think his legs are a bit too... I think we might just have to move them a bit closer together. And I'm doing crimes here because I'm using the move brush, which is of course distorting the whole thing. The best way to do this would be to do the opposite of what I'm doing now. But, you know, I can do what I want. So who cares? Just trying to make him seem a bit more feeble. For this, I would probably look at a reference of somebody who was like anorexic or something like that. You're going to look at a lot of references that can be quite uncomfortable when you're looking at doing character art like this, but I find that to be the best way to do it. Really find references of maybe more extreme body types. It's one of the weird things about doing character art. Man, you're going to see a lot of suffering in humans doing this. For, I think it was Ghostbusters, the 2016 one, I had to look at like meth teeth. So that was good fun. Gotta say, don't recommend looking at meth teeth all day. Just playing around with this, seeing what works. I like the overall direction for his face. I think there's some good stuff in here. Just going over the whole model and trying to make it feel more gestural and just appealing. Alright, we have been going for 1 hour and 40 minutes now. To make sure I don't burn out like a crisp during these Black Friday sales, I think I'm going to end it soon. I've sometimes done these like 2-3 hour ones or 2.5 hour, 3 hour streams, and that is how I burn out. I'm usually always real destroyed after Black Friday or the summer sales, in a good way. It's really fun to do these streams and really fun to talk to you guys. So, and we will keep doing more of these as well. But if there are any last questions, then I can take that. If not, I'm just going to be doodling around a little bit here and seeing how I can take this guy a bit further. I can also, the last question, I'm not going to read it up because it's a bit of a longer one, but the way I do this when it comes to Dynamesh and Zero Mesh is that first I duplicate my dude, then I Zero Mesh that guy, then I subdivide him up to the level I want to, but at the same level as I'm here, and then I'm going to reproject that back from the first mesh to the second mesh. That's a generally fairly good way to do it. At least for sculpting, for retopology, instead of, if you want to do proper retopology, instead of zero meshing it, you just retopology as a hand. But it's still a good idea to zero mesh it, because you, like in between, before you get to the full retopo stage, because now we have, you see we just have crappy topology here to work with, so it can be really beneficial to give it some proper zero mesh topology, because it's just a lot easier to deal with when it comes to sculpting, when it comes to peeling shapes and everything. So zero meshing is fantastic. Just know what it is and what it isn't. What it is good, clean, workable topology. What it's not is functional topology for animation. You just don't control it properly. So for animation, you really need to control everything about the mesh. It's so often faster to do retopology by hand than it is to do it automatically, because with automatic topology, you need to fix stuff constantly, and by fixing stuff, you have to go in and delete loops and add more loops, and then you end up with spending more time fixing it than it would take to just do it by hand anyway. So you might as well just do it by hand in the first time. All right. Liking his face. Not sure about his body. I'll probably continue this guy in like tomorrow's stream or something like that. Let's see how it goes. I want to make collectibles and model kits. My suite consists of ZBrush, Blender, and Photoshop. Can you foresee me requiring more than that to get started? It depends if you want to, what you want to do for collectibles. If they're going to be painted as well, it's a good idea to look into Painter. Like, I'm not sure how you would paint them right in real world, but it can be an idea to use Painter for so you can texture the character from all angles. But if it's just for, let's say they're not painted, they're just the same, then yes, ZBrush, Photoshop, and Blender would be plenty for that. Keep it simple. Alright, with that said, I will finish off for today. I hope you guys enjoyed my little Dobby sculpt here. It's a lot of fun to do this one. It's a lot of fun to just play around with this, have some fun with 3D again. So yeah, thank you guys so much for being in the stream, and I'll see you guys probably tomorrow.